Okay,
put
good.
it on our website. Yeah, and then if you would like to put it on the district, I think this kind of thing is invaluable. Anytime you can
Mm-hmm.
get this kind of information, part of making it self-sustaining is that parents understand the process. And so, and the professional development, you guys are working on the staff and the administration. We're working on parents, and we're going to have
Yep.
a neuropsych, Dr. Maria Goldman. I don't know if you know her. She's outstanding. She's going to be doing a presentation in March to help everybody understand, how does the brain learn to read? Science of reading, structured literacy, the evaluation process, if you get a full neuropsych evaluation. So you guys have to get educated and we have to get educated. So I think this goes a long way. So yes, we will record it and we'll put it on our website. And if you could put it on yours.
Yeah, I can check with Karen on that. That's no doubt.
Okay.
Michelle, I see you have books in your virtual background as well. I did books too. That's so cool.
Actually, I'm at the Lindsay Center. These are real.
I think they're real.
Yeah.
Lindsay Center. It's so busy here at the high school at night. I pulled in and didn't even think about like parking in this parking lot, but it's full even at 6 whenever I got here tonight.
Andy's got like a Harry Potter background kind of. It's got like that vibe.
Oh, that would be cool if I could get the books to like start floating behind me. That would be pretty good effect. I like that.
You go like this or anything? Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm about to have 19.
Oh, okay. All right, we can get started. All right, it looks like it's 7, and so we want to get started. Does that work? Okay. All right. Oh, perfect. All right, we'd like to welcome and thank everyone for attending this evening. My name is Brett Tingley, and I'm the co-founder and president of UA Kid, or Upper Arlington Kids Identified with Dyslexia. We asked the district to speak to all of us tonight to inform all the parents about what they can do if they have a struggling reader and what systems the district has in place to ensure that all kids learn to read. We'd like to thank Andy Hatton. If we can go to that second slide and show his title. Do you have that, Michelle?
I do. Do you guys want me to share my screen and do the slides tonight?
Yeah, I don't know, you're going to be speaking. I don't know if you want me to be in charge of sharing the slides.
I'm happy to do it.
I figure you do a few more of these than I do.
Sorry, I just didn't have it quite there. So let me get to the right spot.
And
Hey, Michelle.
Uh-huh.
Before you share, I see one thing that looks like I just want to correct.
Oh, okay.
Done. You should be able to refresh, and then if you start.
Gotcha.
And while you're doing, I just thought it'd be nice to have your exact titles, because people are moving to different positions and the structure is changing. So it's kind of nice. I keep wanting an org chart for the whole district. It would help kind of see where everybody fits into the big puzzle.
Sorry, it was really slow. I think we're good now.
Perfect. So I'd like to welcome.
It'll take just a second to load back up. I'm trying to.
Perfect. Perfect. I'd like to welcome Dr. Andy Hatton, Associate Superintendent of Learning and Leadership. And I know he was waving before. Now we're watching the screen. Keith Pomeroy, the Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Michelle Banks, the Director of Curriculum and Instruction. So we want to thank them for taking the time to share this really valuable information with all of us. I am going to save the majority of tonight for these three individuals to share all of their information. But before I turn it over, I did want to just give you a little background about UA Kid if you're not familiar with what we are and what we do. We formed UA Kid about a decade ago to ensure that all children with dyslexia in UA learn to read. We then expanded our mission and work in collaboration with the district to ensure that every student, both dyslexic and intuitive readers, learn to read. And we know that reading instruction based in the science, so structured literacy, works for all children. And then if you'll flip to the next slide, I like to kind of go back over every once in a while. I do it and just look at what our objectives are, because it really helps me to focus on what we should be working on, and it helps us see where we've been and where we're going. We worked for a long time to make sure that we had really good screenings in place, to make sure that we have a scientifically based core reading program based on the National Reading Panels report, to make sure that the interventions are, if you could go back. Yeah, no, that's fine. I kind of know, or I have my own copy of it. To make sure that interventions are scientifically based. We want to make sure that our dyslexic students graduate at similar rates to the overall student population. We want to make sure that parents are really well educated and can be a part of this system of their child's educational programming. And we want to promote collaboration between parents and schools. One of the other things that we're really focusing our efforts on right now is to make sure that all of the staff and administrators have really high quality, up-to-date professional development so that they feel empowered and feel confident in their ability to teach every child to read. So that's one of the major things that we've been working with the district on lately. In terms of our role in the community, we just want to make sure that the district is helping every student learn to read. The big part of that, like I said, is what our professional development pushes is right now. We also think that we have a role in educating parents so that they can be a part of that team. So we have a lot of different speakers, neuropsychs, advocates, reading experts. We do dyslexia simulations, IEP coaching, college counselors. And in that spirit, we're having Maria Goldman speak on March 3rd at 7 p.m. It'll be a Zoom call. Are we still sharing the screen? Is there a way to share the screen, Michelle? Or maybe I can. I just want people to see that.
Right, I'm pulling that up. Michelle's computer is being difficult at the moment, so I'll pull that up for you right now.
Yeah, I just want people to see this. Maria Goldman is fabulous. She's a neuropsych here in town, and I want people to put this on their calendars. She's going to be talking about, the science of how children learn to read, the reading brain, all the fMRI studies. It's completely fascinating to me. And then, a little bit about the neuropsych evaluations. I think it's probably the 5th slide. There we go. So March 3rd, please write that down at 7 p.m. And you can go to our website that's at the bottom, uakid.org, or you can email me personally. That's bretttingley@gmail.com. And that we've got that on the very last slide in the presentation. So we also hold general meetings, although we're not doing as much right now with COVID, but that's just an opportunity for parents to get together, network, talk about, teachers, counselors, advocates, etc. So we also want you to know that we welcome new members, and you can join our mailing list by going to uakid.org. So I'm very excited and pleased to introduce Andy, Keith, and Michelle. We're going to let them take it from here. What we've talked about doing, I think the presentation is maybe about half an hour. And, if you've got a burning question, you might put your hand up and we can answer it during the presentation. Or we've got, another 20 or 30 minutes at the end for questions, and you can ask it live. So thank you. So take it from
The
here.
other thing we might suggest there, Brett, is if you have a burning question, put it in the chat as we're going, and we'll capture those as well.
Perfect.
Well, hi, everybody. Good evening. My name is Andy Hatton, and I'm the Associate Superintendent of Learning and Leadership. And I'd like to thank Brett for the invitation and the Dyslexia Task Force for having us here this evening. We're really excited about the continued partnership that we have, and excited to share about what we do for kids in terms of literacy and reading. And so in the spirit of, Martin Luther King Day on Monday, the great Frederick Douglass once said that once you learn to read, you will be forever free. And this for us is a very is meaningful work. We always center on our why and why we do what we do. And for us, literacy is, the access, and it is about equity and access. It definitely connects to our social emotional learning. It connects to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Also, another quick quote from the great Kofi Annan, for everyone, everywhere, literacy is, along with education in general, a basic human right. And so we do, I don't start these off to just be a little cheesy or anything. We mean these things. We center on these things. And this type of work that we are committed to in the district, and in partnership with our parents and in partnership with the Dyslexia Task Force, is what helps drive us in our work as we, move forward in, pre-COVID and now in the midst of COVID times, because it is challenging work. And in many of the articles that you'll read around the science of reading and around literacy, especially for early learners, you'll see a quote that comes up a lot. And I said it a long time ago as a principal, that teaching one to read is not rocket science, it's harder. This is really challenging work, and we need to do it really well. And we are doing it well, and we're going to only get better. So very excited to share with you this evening some things about the district. So we're going to start with some big picture components, and then drill down into how we support all readers and how we support our struggling readers. So on the screen right now, what you can see is that this is our strategic plan on one snapshot. And many of you have probably seen this before. We've had the same strategic plan for a while. A lot of work went into this, but we have two basic goals. It's whole learning, and it's student and staff well-being, and that belonging and school life balance are very important to us. So to have belonging, to belong in the classroom, literacy is extremely important. And what you're going to see here is that this is woven through the fabric of our strategic plan. So on the next slide, one of the things that we wanted to share, that we know that this past year has been just significantly impacted. Our kids, our adults, our community. When you take a quick look at the screen, we are very well aware this weighs heavy on our hearts, because we know that early literacy, K-1, 2, pre-K, 1, 2, is extremely important. And when you look at that, the learners that we have in our schools right now, in our buildings, and you all know this as parents, the children in kindergarten 1 and 2 right now have not had what we would consider a normal or a typical year of school, in terms of no hybrid, no distance learning, no online academy, those kind of things. And we have amazing teachers and amazing support from our community doing the best they can given the circumstances, but this is very much on our mind in terms of how we are addressing early literacy. So with that in mind, one of the components of our strategic plan that you'll see on the next slide is embedded in our strategic plan that I referenced a moment ago. We already had built in pre-pandemic the goal of building a multi-tiered system of support. RTI has been around for a long time, response to intervention, and that was very good work over the last 20 years. However, in general, it's based on a deficit system. When there's a problem, we're going to react to a problem. Multi-tiered system of support is much more strength-based, meeting learners where they are, and matching what you're going to hear a theme of tonight as we talk about what we call MTSS is meeting each child's needs, and that we match the instructional strategies and the supports and the intervention to the learner, okay? And so we're going to be emphasizing that throughout the evening. On the next slide, this is just a kind of a definition of how we approach meeting the needs of all students. A systematic and collaborative team process. And so one of the other things that you're going to hear tonight, folks, is that it's not just, the schools. It is, when we say collaborative, we mean parents are at the table, the dyslexia task force when needed. If it is another group or agency or support, it's collaboration. That is our focus with MTSS. It is responsive to the needs of all students, the students that are in front of us right now, this year, this week, next month. It is differentiated and individualized. One of the things that you have likely seen in our strategic plan, the previous strategic plan and the new iteration that we work under now, is that we've talked about personalized learning for a long time. MTSS really puts this into action. And that's what you're going to see. And then the next step of this action, as I've stated, in terms of the science of reading, structured literacy is makes science of reading come to life. It is the action that we take in the classroom to individualize and personalize where students are to meet their needs. So on this slide, as we continue to talk about MTSS, you're going to hear my colleagues talk a little bit about these different tiers of support. And in the past, one of the things that we've heard is, with response to intervention, that might be a tier 2 student or a tier 3 student or a tier 1. No. We are eliminating that type of vernacular, and under the leadership of Keith and Michelle and our whole teaching and learning team, students are students. They're human beings. They're here to learn and grow. It is our job. What you see on the screen right here is for us as adults to know when we diagnose where a child is in their reading journey and in their literacy journey, we need to match the right resources to meet their needs, as I said on the previous screen, to match and personalize the learning. So as you hear this evening, I want you to imagine almost that these tiers, imagine like the silhouette of your child right in the middle of this. And these tiers move side to side, but we meet the need of the child based on the type of supports that they need, okay? So I know you all can read a screen, and I'm gonna allow my colleagues to explain this a little bit more in depth here in a moment. Years ago,
Dr. Hatton,
yes.
can I just jump in there? That this impacts not only the literacy journey, but this is beyond literacy. So when we're looking at the multi-tiered systems of support, we're looking at things even beyond literacy. Our focus is literacy tonight, but this impacts how we look at the needs of a child in math and in other areas, socially, emotionally, right? So just wanted to reiterate that.
Thank you so much. That is spot on. That's absolutely right. We're going to start off this evening with a couple stories, and here in a moment we're going to play a very short video clip for you to get back to what we opened with. One of our values, obviously in the district, is start with heart. And like I said, this is very important work for us, and it's on our minds and heart all the time. In my house, we would read to our children, and when my daughter was really young, we would read a book called Going on a Bear Hunt. And I don't know if you all are familiar with that book or that story, but there's a phrase in there on going on a bear hunt. We can't go over it. We can't go under it. We've got to go through it. And I noticed that when she was really little, she would read the pages, and I put that in air quotes, because she just knew what page she was on and where she was and all of these sorts of things. And as we all know, decades ago, and one of the components about literacy was the whole language approach, which we know is not the approach that is beneficial and teaches kids to read in terms of like this learning by osmosis. But she was so excited about reading and so excited about literacy that she picked up books and she was trying to get through it. And so then what I noticed in her progression throughout the years was like when she would read aloud, and still even today as a college student, I'd say 1 out of every 50 to 100 words, she's still missing and puts the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, right? And so there are components that were missed at times, I think, in some of her development. And so every individual reader has a story, And our approach to finding out that story of what they need is through the science of reading. What we want to show you right now, because is the truth about reading, and it's a very short video clip. Who's queued this up? Keith, are you running right now? Okay, so let's go ahead and show the video, and then I'm going to kick this off to my colleagues.
I'm just going to do a reshare to make sure I'm getting the audio with it.
So go ahead, time going down, and just read me those words from the top to the bottom.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, you're right.
Bought, interested, knowledge, peace, euphemism. Unless I really dig deep into this one, I don't have an answer.
Really hard. The answer is really hard.
This seems like elementary school. I feel embarrassed.
All across this country, kids are not being taught how to read the words.
This is a misunderstanding that has to be exposed, that the system works for most kids and it's those few that fail. And that's a lie.
Look it up, it's everywhere. You will see over 60% of children are not reading at grade level proficiency.
I was definitely hiding, keeping this secret to myself because I was embarrassed. More than anything, I felt like a fraud.
I remember I was always nervous to get called on. The teacher would realize like who would read the best. They would eventually just continue calling on that person to read. I would always struggle.
17 years I taught public high school in California. I could not read, write, or spell.
We've got large challenges here in America. No greater challenge than to make sure that every child, not just a few children, every child receive a first-class education.
The No Child Left Behind law. No Child Left Behind had us focused on standardized tests, which start in 3rd grade. So everyone was laser focused on 3rd grade and beyond, and kind of what was happening K1, 2, they lost track of it.
There's a notion, a belief that kids start to read because they've matured to the point where they're ready to start reading. Not correct.
The reading wars, should we be teaching kids phonics or what was termed whole language? The theory was they just need to memorize a whole bunch of words and that's what good readers do.
They say, no, it's all about comprehension. But I say, well, if they can't read the words, how can they comprehend? It's almost like suggesting that a child who was listening to Mozart all their life, you put them in front of a piano and you say, now you play Mozart.
The research is unequivocally solid that phonemic awareness is absolutely critical to reach your highest potential reading and in spelling. It's something that we use all the time when we're reading and we don't even know it.
It's a lot more than phonics. It's the mechanics of how to read.
My daughter's kindergarten year, I was in the classroom. I saw their teaching instruction. She had directed them away from the words. Look at the picture. Do you think it's a bear or is it a fox? It stopped me in my tracks because it was everything that I had taught myself to do to look like a good reader.
And so you have to ask yourself, if we have this data, if we have this knowledge, why does there have to be a war? When we know that the outcome of us having that debate is literally the trajectory of someone's life.
If people only knew. It just totally tears you apart.
This entire issue requires a grassroots movement of parents and educators who are angry and who say enough is enough.
We're not dumb. We're not dumb. It's not too late.
Thanks for showing that, Keith. So powerful video, powerful message. And again, like I stated at the outset, this centers us on our why. And before I kick it over to my colleagues, on the next slide, I do want to say up front that everyone is clear. From the highest levels of our leadership, these are the commitments. And I want to thank and appreciate Dr. Nidhi Santiani, who's a newly elected board member, is with us this evening. From the highest levels of our organization, from the Board of Education to the superintendent, to all of us, we are committed to teaching all children to read through structured literacy, like I said earlier, which is that actual approach to the science of reading in the classroom, breathing life into it, with specific focus with the earliest readers on alphabet skills, phonological awareness, phonics and decoding, right? This is what we are dedicated to, so that all learners develop that love for reading, because learning to read and a love for reading are not mutually exclusive. They go hand in hand, okay? And we do both at a very high level, and we're gonna continue to get better at this. So with that, I wanna shift the conversation to the what we do and how we do it for all learners, and then what we do specifically for those who are struggling to read.
Thanks, Andy. I know that video, at least for all of us, I know on this screen, and then for others who have watched it, we've shown it to our teachers, and it's hard to watch. And it is hard to watch, and that's okay. And I think what Andy just ended with is why it's going to be okay, because we are committed to the 3 definitions, for example, here on the screen, the things that we know are going to help our kids learn to read, your kids, our kids, to learn to read. So I want to take a few minutes, and we're going to spend 3 quick slides on a little bit more, in case there are some of us on the screen who are interested in hearing a little bit more about the details of what is this science of reading, and what is this answer that we're pointing to as the instructional methods we're going to use in our classrooms. And I would like to say that our teachers are learning, and our teachers are growing, and we're proud of them, and we are behind them, and we will continue to support them as they too are growing in their learning. Most of you on this screen are huge fans of Andy Rosen, and I know she's out there in the audience tonight as well on the screen, and she has been a very important part in bringing this information to our teachers, and we're thankful for that. So with that, this is a slide that we actually have used in professional learning for our kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade teachers as of now, and we'll continue on up through 5th grade. But one of the definitions you'll see, you keep hearing us talk about this science of reading and what is it, and truly we're landing on just helping us understand it's a body of research from related disciplines that we have had access to over decades. And you have helped us too, and Brett and this organization have been a part of saying, let's look at that same research that's been there. And so that's what we are referring to. We talk about the simple view of reading and Scarborough's rope, and those are graphics and illustrations, and we're going to show you those in just a minute, that help explain this science of reading in its simplest form. And then structured literacy. I think both Keith and Andy mentioned that this is the classroom application. This is where it happens in the classroom, taking that body of research with all of the disciplines that were a part of that, and apply it in the classroom, what it looks like, what it sounds like, what it feels like with our kids. Keith, you can move us on to the next. So these are those graphics. When we talk about the simple view of reading, we're talking about very specific things, and the rope then is going to go into more detail of this graphic of the simple view. So we talk about word recognition, language comprehension, which lead to reading comprehension. So when we look over at the rope, for example, under word recognition, the bottom part of that rope, you'll see there are specific components that we need to learn as readers in order to read. That phonological awareness that's there, the decoding, all the sight recognition, anything that has to do with word recognition. That multiplied by, not just added to, but multiplied by the language comprehension, a deep understanding of that language piece, oral language, that verbal reasoning, the literacy piece, all of the things that often we've done well in our K-2 classrooms. That word recognition might be something that you heard like on the video, where maybe as a student, those people that were in that video may not have had much along the lines of the word recognition in terms of specific and explicit instruction. And what we have learned through this simple view of reading, through the science of reading, the graphic helps us see we need the word recognition, all of the pieces and parts of that rope, language comprehension. That does lead to a skilled reader with strong reading comprehension. Lots more details there, but want to give you that quick overview. Keith, we can move forward to the next. Structured literacy gives students at every level of understanding. So I'm going to kind of think through that idea of that MTSS framework that we have that supports all students. So when we think about all students in literacy, structured literacy and the components that we are saying they are included in that give every student at every level of understanding, if they're right on track, if they're struggling, if they're advanced and ready to just run and fly, this is giving them an advantage and an opportunity to move forward. This is something that we wanted our teachers to know and understand, our parents to know and understand. This is why we're choosing to use structured literacy as what's happening in our classrooms. It is not just for our most struggling readers. We believe it's necessary for them. We believe it's critical for them, but we also know that is helping all of our kids move from where they are and move forward with a deeper level of understanding in literacy. Okay, the next slide, I think, Keith, you are going to jump in here and help us on the next couple to dig in a little bit deeper in regard to supporting our students.
Yeah, we felt it was important when Dr. Hatton showed earlier in terms of our multi-tiered system of support. You'll hear us talk about 4 different tier levels here, and I'm just going to talk briefly about those. And again, we're focused on literacy this evening, so we're going to give you examples that are focused on literacy, but this is not only impacting literacy. This is a structured way where we know we're looking at every child and we're looking at the needs of every child, and we're talking about every child on a consistent basis. And I'll tell you, as we're in the first full year of implementation at the elementary level on this, the work that we're seeing is phenomenal. The conversations that it's driving can be a bit overwhelming to our teachers at times and to our MTSS leads, but it's such good work to see this happening. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the different tier levels. So tier 1, we're looking at classroom instruction and with responsive teaching. So that's going to be directly in the classroom. You'll hear us talk about tier 2 being tier 1 plus small group or individual instruction targeted to fit the needs, but that's going to be happening within the classroom, right? So you'll hear us talk about the classroom teacher or the counselor there listed. When we talk about tier 3, each child is going to be receiving tier 1 and tier 2 support at that point, plus intensive instruction and intervention beyond tier 1 and tier 2 if they're in that setting. So that's going to be a classroom teacher, but also specialized staff, right? So you're going to have a reading specialist or a counselor working on the intensive instruction and intervention. And then tier 4 would go beyond that. That'd be tier 1 plus tier 2 plus specifically designed instruction. So just going through the different tier levels, what we want you to know is we want to walk you through what we're doing in each setting. So when we talk about tier 1 and tier 2, you're going to hear us focus a little bit on that to start with. And Dr. Banks, jump in if you need to. Like you had your hand, you were like, you had that look on your face, like maybe I need to jump in here.
No, you're doing great. Keep going.
So when I look at our approach to literacy instruction through MTSS, what we want you to know is when we talk about assessments, we're starting with a universal screener, meaning that's a screener that everyone is receiving. So you'll hear us talk about STAR, STAR Early Literacy or STAR Reading. And that universal screener is going to allow us to kind of gather some information on every child and get a feel for, are there any things that we're seeing within that we need to pay attention to? And then we add to that baseline assessments. So you'll hear us talk about letter and sound ID. You'll hear us talk about Haggerty. You'll hear us talk about additional ones beyond that, but we're going to just give you kind of that overview. And we're taking all of that information to make decisions about what are the needs of this child. So when we talk about those tiers of support, tier 1 is for all students. So that's every child receiving structured literacy based on the science of reading, as we've talked about. And tier 2 is whole group and small group and individual instruction. Again, it's going to be structured literacy based on the science of reading as well. So you'll hear us talk about that, but you're seeing we go from all students to then whole group, small group, and individual instruction between tier 1 and tier 2. And then I think Dr. Banks is going to kind of walk you through how we use that baseline data and what we do as we get into examples. Oh, got a little carried away there. There you go.
All right, so real quickly, just a quick example, and we know we could take many different grade levels and we could take an evening and just talk to each of you about each of these grade levels. But in an effort to just give you a quick glimpse, if we look at a student who would be on track, they are in tier 1, they are receiving classroom instruction. We have off to the side there, you'll see there's a universal screener that Keith mentioned that we use STAR. If a child shows no flags in that and they're right on track, that we also have baseline data, and those are a variety of things. He mentioned if it's first grade, it may be something in Heggerty that's helping us with a phonemic awareness assessment. We also have CTOP, and that is something that they were given in kindergarten. So if this is a first grade student, they were given CTOP, which is another assessment, and either they showed flags or didn't. And let's walk through real quickly what happens in this flow chart. So the first box you'll see at the top says shows instructional needs on baseline data. So they've taken STAR, they had no flags. They were given the CTOP in kindergarten, and here we are in the fall of first grade, and they had no flags on CTOP, which was for phonemic awareness as well. But they did show some concerns, some needs in the other baseline data that we had. So the teacher is going to do what we said we do in tier 1, which is we be responsive to the students in front of us. So those classroom teachers are going to respond to those needs. They're going to reteach something. They're going to teach it differently. They're going to differentiate in their classroom to meet the needs of that student. They may also decide that they need to meet with that student a little more frequently, or perhaps a little more intensely, and do some more around that subject that they're struggling with. That would be considered that tier 2 instruction in the classroom as a first grade teacher. If you look at the bottom below that, let's say all the data was within or even above expectations. So this is a student on track, remember, and all their data, including the baseline, is within or above. Then the teacher is going to continue to provide solid tier 1 instruction, and if needed, some tier 2 differentiated support to extend and enrich that student. And then finally, these kiddos, as Dr. Hatton started with, all of our students are our students. And so we're looking at how we provide service to them and support them. Our student support teams meet regularly. These are our classroom teachers, school counselors, IS, lots of different teachers meeting together regularly to analyze data, monitor their progress for all students. Classroom teacher continues to provide ongoing tier 1 and if needed, tier 2 supports. So this is a quick glimpse at an on-track student. Let's keep going though, Keith. So when we talk about tier 1, real quickly, again, these are some of those resources. I'm not even going to read all these, but you've heard these names now. These are curricular resources that we use in kindergarten and first grade specifically, kindergarten and third grade, some of these. So again, what happens in tier 1? Classroom instruction. Here are some of the resources that could be included in their classroom. Okay. Tier 2, just a little bit more information because you'll have access to these if you want to go back and look at these slides. But the idea of what are some of the, in addition to tier 1, this teacher has said, oh, these 3 or 4 kiddos need this. Maybe they need a double dip of the same resource we were using, Heggerty, if it came to phonemic awareness, or in phonics with our foundations resource. Maybe it's a specific individually targeted skill that we need to do with them. Maybe it's a small group. We have another resource that we're doing as a book study, K-5 across the district, our David Kilpatrick book called Equipped for Reading Success. They have these 1-minute drills that are fantastic to do with students that our 4th and 5th grade teachers are using with their kids, for example, and some tier 2 support. So those would be some examples for tier 2. Keep going. So Keith and I are going to kind of jump back and forth. Keith, do you want to jump in here?
Sure. How do we know if a child is struggling with literacy? There's things that we're going to be looking for. So what families and teachers might notice if a child is struggling with reading, there are certain things that we're going to be asking about along the way, or you may be noticing. So that a child may talk later than most children. They may have difficulty pronouncing words, may be unable to recall the right words at the right time. I think there's, a really good example in that video where, they talk about the way reading was being instructed, where they were looking at the pictures rather than that. But if a child is having trouble recalling the right word, they may have difficulty with rhyming. This is certainly one that we look for along the way. And then also may have trouble learning the alphabet, numbers, days of the week, colors, shapes, how to spell and write their name. So all things that we're going to be looking at, and may have difficulty telling and or retelling the story in the correct sequence. So that sequencing and recalling what happened in the story as they're reading, that's going to be an important part. And often has difficulty separating sounds in words and blending sounds to make words. I don't know, Dr. Banks, if you wanted to give any more detail on those.
No, I just wanted to jump in and say, now clearly these are examples. So on the one column, we're thinking about things that maybe you've been seeing as parents from early on, may or may not have seen, as well as that next column is really, okay, so what's happening in the classroom? Are we seeing some of these things as concerns in our classroom? You may, in conferences with your kindergarten or first grade teacher, have them say, here's some things I'm noticing. What are you noticing at home? So when we talk about tonight, part of what we're talking about are kids who are struggling with reading. These are some of the things that we see as common struggles for students who are learning to read. Certainly not an exhaustive list by any means. So Keith, let's go to the next screen. I want to make sure there's a lot of slides and we've got a lot of information, but I want to give you this example. So tonight we've said, if you're here and you're concerned about your child and they're struggling with reading, what are some of the things we're doing in school? So if you've seen some of those things at home, we've seen some concern at school. Again, we go back to, we use that universal screener. We have baseline data. We have CTOP in kindergarten, but this is a first grader who, for example, at the top there, they scored below this 90 on CTOP, which means that that was a flag for us. That shows an area of concern. And then in addition, in that box, the scenario is that the child also flagged on STAR. There were additional points of concern from the baseline data. So the bottom line is we know that tier 2 supports begin in the classroom right away. After that, you see the arrow go across that talks about 4 to 6 weeks of continuing intervention and instructional strategies, analyzing that data, monitoring progress to see, do we keep going or do we perhaps need to jump down to the bottom of that screen where you see 2 or more scores? That starts that way. Because the bottom line is we're working to meet the needs of your students, your children. So again, if they had met 4 to 6 weeks and they were doing great, then we keep going. And we continue with, wow, these scaffolds are helping, the strategies are helping, we're seeing real growth here. If we saw that that wasn't happening, we move down to those bottom boxes. There's another scenario there that either we entered this path the first time by having 2 or more scores below 90 on that CTOP, concerns on STAR, concerns in baseline data, or they've joined this area of concern because they weren't showing progress from up above. Then we meet as that student support team and probably tweak some intervention, probably tweak what is happening. And based on those data points, we may even decide that that child has had some tier 3 support. Tier 3 meaning right now for us, those are reading specialists in the district. Those reading specialists are also, are all OG trained, for example, in the science of reading. Those teachers with tier 3 support are pulling students out of the classroom. Let's say that's happening. That middle box reminds us that in 4 to 6 weeks, we've got ongoing progress monitoring happening. And at that point, if we see that based on all of those data points that the team suspects a disability, we may at that point move to some more multi-factored evaluation or some version of evaluations that we feel are important. I feel like the last meeting, Brett, that you had with this group, Dr. Engel spent some time, some real time right here in that conversation around our kiddos who have either been moved from that tier 3 to tier 4 support, where they're having an IEP, that individualized plan that is specific to them. So we didn't want to go too far into that tonight because we know you guys have spent a decent amount of time there, but really wanted to make sure we were clear on the other tiers. So
Well,
Keith, if
and
we could-
that's the way, yeah, that's the way that you guys might identify a student. That's the process that you go through. But I want to elaborate that a parent, if they suspect their child might have dyslexia, they can always ask for a multi-factored evaluation by writing a letter and simply saying, you know, I think my child might have a dyslexia, and so I'd like to have an evaluation, and that kind of triggers that whole process. So a parent is a very valuable part of that because they see the kid at home and they're doing homework with them, and then you see them at school, and this is how you might pick them up. But between the two of us, we're going to help find that kid.
Absolutely. And I know in a few slides, one of the main points that really I was going to make, Brett, was along those lines of whenever you as a parent have any concern about what's happening in terms of literacy for this group, of course, we want you to reach out to their classroom teacher first and foremost and say, what are you seeing? What are you thinking? Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm thinking. Here are my concerns. And we absolutely want you to start with that. As part of this MTSS process, we also are providing opportunities where we are reaching out to parents, and we want your input on those things in terms of what are you seeing at home to help us support what that needs to happen at school. So I appreciate that. Keith, I think we can keep going again. I know we want to try to leave some time for questions and answers. So just that quick overview again of what happens in tier 2 in the classroom. I think we can move forward to that next slide, Keith, if you will. Tier 3 was where I mentioned that small group meeting with reading specialists. And at that point, if your child is receiving that tier 3, we believe that they are receiving the right support and the right instruction, exactly what Brett is saying. If there's other things that are happening that we need to address, those OG trained reading specialists are our experts, and we're so thankful that we have them to be able to work with our kiddos at that tier 3 level. Of course, being ready then for that next tier, and I think that might be next, Keith, on our last slide here in regard to tier, where intervention examples could include an individual education plan, where there is a diagnosis with a specific learning disability in basic reading, where we do believe there's some direct small group or perhaps one-on-one, explicit, systematic, and multisensory approach. Our tier 3 and tier 4 have so many things in common now because it's the right thing for kids. Actually, our tier 1 to 4 has so much in common in terms of using that science of reading. And I know that's a very different place than we were years ago when this group started to meet as well. All right, Keith, I think we're ready for our summary. So in terms of MTSS and why it matters this year and what it is that we really are using this framework to help support kids. So again, this is a problem-solving team with not just teachers, but families. We want you to be a part of that with open and honest collaboration. Brett just mentioned that, where we have data-based decision-making, where we believe there are valid and reliable assessments that we use. One of the things we wanted to point out based on the new dyslexia law that was just passed, and many of you are aware, that beginning in the fall of 2022, we will have a new dyslexia screener that will be a part of this flow chart that's not on there right now. And when that vendor approved list is given to all of us through the State Department, we will be able to choose what that looks like. And of course, we have a great team of people to help us make that decision, but we're excited about that in terms of the dyslexia screener being one of those important pieces early on that we use to find out how we can best meet the needs of the kids in front of us. Of course, we always consider family history of reading and reading difficulties, specifically dyslexia or any phonological awareness concerns at all. That's a part of that collaboration with families. And then again, that structured literacy approach, tiers 1 through tier 4, to meet the needs of our kids.
And Michelle, Dr. Banks, I guess I want to hit on there when we consider the family history of reading difficulties and dyslexia. That's something that we've added to our enrollment process along the way. UA Kid has asked us to really gather that information to make sure that we're paying close attention to that. And that's been critical information to gather along the way.
Yeah. All right.
So thank you, Dr. Banks and Mr. Pomeroy for going over those things. I think that really outlines how we approach literacy, the teaching of literacy, the teaching of reading, and how we support our struggling readers. And before we open it up to Q&A and just we'll probably stop sharing the screen here and have a conversation for a little bit. I want to end with what I opened with. And like I said, with the book that we read in our house called Going on a Bear Hunt, there's no going around it. There's no going under it. It's only going through it. And again, I really want to celebrate the passion that UA Kid and the Dyslexia Task Force has had for this work. And I want to celebrate Andrea Rosen, Dr. Kevin Gorman, who was there at the beginning, I think, predated many of us in terms of helping to lay this foundation for our district and for our children. And while I think we're, making it right and making sure that we get this right, we're also addressing the needs of children who are currently in high school, who are currently in middle school, but continuing to build this foundation. That Brett and I were talking earlier when we were jumping on the Zoom. This is about building a legacy, systems in our district that are going to be permanent. Teachers come and go, leaders come and go. People who are going to be in charge of the dyslexia task force down the road are going to come and go. But when these are in place, now if the science were to change, we're going to change. We're going to adapt, and we're going to do what's right for kids. But that's what I love about working in our district, is that we don't dig our heels in. We look at new information and we adjust to make sure that we're meeting the needs of kids. So on the next slide, I just want us all, before we jump into Q&A, we like to close with taking away 3 things. And if you take away any 3 things from what we just talked about, is to know that from the top of our leadership into every facet of every classroom, structured literacy is our approach, okay? Number 2, we have a responsive and systematic way to approach the teaching of reading in our schools, and that's that MTSS structure, right? To personalize. And 3, we meet the instructional needs of each child. Again, it's the systems of support adjust accordingly to what that child needs. So thank you so much. Again, shout out to the panel and the team for sharing. And at this time, I think we'd like to maybe, and we can, I don't know, one of the things that we like to do is there we go, stop screen share, and then we can engage in some conversation and some questions and answers.
Hi, this is Nicole. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Great. Hey, I had a question for you. I think you mentioned something about a list of vendors for 2022. Is it it's fall, right? Fall of 2022. Do you know how the list of vendors is being determined?
Dr. Banks, you're on mute. I believe the Ohio Department of Education is actually working through and looking at the dyslexia screeners, and they will give us an approved vendor list of screeners that we can select from.
And the guidebook will have certain validity and criterion validity and what can I think of the word I want to say? Reliability coefficients on what range those have to be in, how sensitive they have to be, making sure that they're valid. And they also have a list of the different components for each grade level. So for example, if I'm giving this in the first year to a kindergartner, then I need to make sure that there's things in it like phonological awareness, that there's, those types of things that are really strong predictors of reading success later on.
Hi, this is Diana Webster. Can you hear me okay? Okay, can you talk a little bit about like if a new family moves into the Arlington City School District, and how you might help like their family of like 3 or 4 acclimate to the school system and identify if their children have struggling readers?
Yeah, absolutely. So for one specific thing that I would start with is that we have about 30 days from the time any student enrolls to administer our universal screener. So every new student, K-5 would receive our screener is STAR. That's our universal screener to show on track or off track in terms of literacy and math. And so that would be the first thing that all new students do. We then, by grade level, have those baseline assessments that I mentioned, the baseline data That too is done with all new students. And then any other assessment as a student is there. For example, if we use that screener, they take STAR, we see flags or concerns, any of our baseline data, we have concerns. And of course, any classroom and instructional formative and summative assessments we use in our classroom, we want to look at those and have that teacher input and of course, family input. Those would be all ways that we would identify as new students are coming into the district, any area of support we might see. So for example, when I said some of the formative or summative, it might be we've done a unit of foundations. We had this other data, they didn't flag and they're fairly new, but all of a sudden we're seeing this real gap start to show up in some of the other things we're doing in our classroom. That is where that conversation goes to that MTSS student support team. And we start to have those conversations. So whether, that's for sure, if they're new, those same things happen for them that are happening for the rest of our students.
Can you talk a little bit about how it might look for like a middle school family or a high school family, please?
Sorry, I muted and then I couldn't unmute. I think for example, at the middle school family, for sure, we also have a universal screener that we use. We use STAR, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, up through 8th grade and into 9th and 10th for some of our subjects. So
into the high school level, yes.
Right. So that would be one area as well. I mean, one assessment that I know that we use, and I can speak mostly to the elementary. So I don't know if there's anything else in terms of new students to the district and what we do.
I think we have such a solid set of baselines at the elementary level. Certainly we're looking for those flags. I think it's also important that we're gathering that family history at the middle and high school level as well, in order to look at that information. And then their MTSS teams are already constantly looking at data. What you're seeing laid out here is we are still, we will be fully implementing MTSS at the secondary level more completely. In the future, we're working out that process to look similar to what we're doing at the elementary level, but obviously the assessments are different when you get into the higher levels.
I do
I'd
want
like to
go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, hi. I wanted to jump in, and I see one of the questions in the chat here that says, would the new dyslexia screener be in addition to this top? So I want to take on that one, and then if so, how would they be given at different points in time? So we're going to answer that right now, and then how do we currently communicate CTOP results out to parents? So I do know that as we wait for this list from the state, one of the distinctions I want to make is that there is a screener, which is one type of tool, and then there's a diagnostic. So when we have a screener, which as Dr. Banks talked about, that's going to be forthcoming from the state, the list that we're going to be able to choose from. All students will get the screener. When and this is where I'm going to need my experts to jump in a little bit, but once we have a set of flags, concerns, data points, then we take that child and we do a deeper dive with a diagnostic tool, which may be CTOP. Andy Rosen or Michelle, do you want to jump in right there and explain how that's going to work?
Yeah, I mean, Andy Rosen, of course, jump in. I think really where you were headed, Andy Hatton, is exactly right, that our dyslexia screener is something that is really new. The state has finally caught up to what we were doing. You mentioned Dr. Gorman, and that's something we started, I mean, at this point, 9 years ago, maybe 10, in terms of digging deeper into phonemic awareness, the phonological processing of our kids. And that is where, that's the reference to that screener. So in addition to, so the question was, would they be given at different times or different points? You already answered that, Andy, correctly, that the screener will be given. It would be the dyslexia screener that has to be a vendor approved screener. That'll be the first line. If we have areas of concern, and again, remember, we'll have the dyslexia screener, we have a universal screener, we'll have baseline assessments that we work on with our experts, our reading specialists with Andy Rosen, in terms of what those are and making sure those are solid. From there, if we needed to give CTOP, we know how reliable and how valid it is. And yes, that's when we would give that to any child that we think might need a deeper dive into that phonological processing. Andy Rosen, did I miss anything?
I think so. So basically, when we started giving the CTOP, we did it because we needed to do it. We were a district that was in the process of learning and fixing a lot of things systematically in the district. we didn't have the luxury of stopping and picking out kind of, okay, we're going to do this. We just needed to make sure that while we were learning, we were doing the right thing at that point. With the new dyslexia law, it specifically says for a screener, we don't want to focus on a diagnostic yet, because that screener is going to tell us, it's almost like when you go to the doctor just for a checkup, it's going to give us all the numbers just for that initial checkup. And then if something pops up, then we say, okay, we need to figure out where and what's happening. You know, if my blood pressure is high, let's look at our heart. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. That's where CTOP comes in. So I'm a huge fan of CTOP. So definitely it's a diagnostic assessment. So that's how we will start to use it. If you ask most reading specialists, like I know Brett and I had talked about this before, like with Louis Simotes, for example, if you say, oh, we give every child the CTOP, they almost fall over because they say, wait, that's diagnostic, that's not a screener. And we get that, but at the beginning, that's where we had to start. We had to do that while we were educating everyone, while we were getting everyone up to speed, because unfortunately, most people come out of university not knowing this stuff. So we had to fix that problem. While we were fixing that problem, we adopted CTOP. So now with this new dyslexia law, we'll be able to pick from a screener that is a very sensitive screener that will pick up, you know, specifically we're talking about dyslexia, but also other reading disabilities. And then if we have any questions and we need a diagnostic, then we have a diagnostic tool to go to. So that's kind of would be my answer to that.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. And Michelle, I see one here too, but if it's okay, I would like to, there's one here in the chat that says, can we share anything about our responsiveness and systems at the middle school? And I can't recall if we touched on that a moment ago. Let's make sure we hit that one. And
I think we did touch on that, Andy, a little bit about how this is different at the middle level.
Gotcha. Okay, good. Wanted to just make sure we got it.
I had another question. When we talk about the tiers, so tier 2, 3, and 4, the student is getting a little extra because there is some concern. What are your plans, or what are the requirements, or what are you planning on doing about notifying parents? How do you communicate to parents where their child is on this MTSS train?
Yeah, it's a great.
Real quick, but as the team jumps in, and I love that question, Brett, thank you so much for that. One of the things that I also want to clarify, because Keith is on my shoulder right now, because I had a miss earlier in the presentation about what MTSS is. And I also want to remember that MTSS is not just about concern. It also might be about stretch, or, extension, or ultimately acceleration for a learner. You know, we do have children, again, it's just about meeting kids where they are. And sometimes we have twice exceptional students that might have some deficits, but also have a lot of strength, if not need of more enrichment or acceleration. So just wanted to point that out real quick, and then I'll pass it over to Michelle.
No, I think it's a great question. And I love the fact that part of this is, we always talk about this analogy of building the plane while we're flying it. I mean, we get up and come to school every day and teach kids, right? And in the midst of that, we're creating a framework that is systemic and systematic and will be withstanding. So I think, Brett, that's the right question. And that's something that we are working on. So we're creating protocols that happen within the meeting. So we're asking questions that are the same across our 5 buildings, for example. So the experience that the kids are having is the same in terms of our responsiveness. We're talking about parent communication. We're talking about having that on an ongoing basis with parents, from the classroom teacher and reaching out from the classroom teacher first to perhaps if it, eventually right now we're talking about literacy, but if it's a social emotional concern, or, maybe it's the school counselor that says, here's what we're seeing and have some concerns. What are you seeing? But in terms of literacy, absolutely that will come first from your classroom teacher. We also have MTSS leads in our building, and those are some teachers on special assignment who are helping us roll this out in both professional learning with classroom teachers. They also are currently being trained in the Orton Gillingham with Andy Rosen. and will eventually transform them into our instructional coaches, which is why it's super important that they also have that high level of OG training. So in terms of meeting with parents, you may hear from an MTSS lead who is reaching out perhaps after you've talked to a classroom teacher to say, you know what, we'd love to get together. Can you jump on Zoom with us, or can you come into the building? So as your child is perhaps in tier 1 and tier 2 in the classroom, you may or may not hear specifically, here's what I'm doing. You know, those things happen in school all the time. But if your child and the data is starting to show concern enough that we're saying, you know, we're sitting here and providing some tier 2 with these kids, let's get with mom and dad, let's get with the family, let's get with the parents and say, here's what we're trying, here's what we're seeing, what are you seeing? So parents should be pulled in around then, and pulled in meaning could be Zoom, could be live. And then from there, if they're going to start meeting with that, pulling out with a reading specialist, that tier 3 support, you for sure will receive something that also asks your permission and says, yes, we know this is happening. We're excited about it. We can't wait to do it, which is what most parents say. But of course, those are steps that we would take as well to involve parents. So great question.
I see one here in the chat that I want to say welcome to Kay, first-time parent UA school system. And just to read it for everybody, I'm going to be honest, I'm very uneducated about what my kids are learning or being tested on. First off, let's see, I appreciate you hosting the session tonight as a first-time parent in the school system. What should I be on the lookout for? So I want to start this one by saying, again, welcome, and thank you for being here tonight. So glad that you're engaged. One of the things, without knowing the grade level there, I would always say, connect with the teachers. We want to be very transparent about what's going on in our classrooms and in our schools. We do know, I've only been in the district 5 years, but we are working very hard right now behind the scenes to enhance our web pages in the teaching and learning realm, so that we are talking, so that we're making very transparent how we thoughtfully weave in social and emotional learning, our diversity, equity, and inclusion work, along with literacy, along with the assessments that we give, along that, there's a lot of jargon that we use and acronyms and abbreviations and alphabet soup that we use. And our board has asked us to do this, and it's just the right work to do. And so is a lot of our families. So more to come on that. But let me look to the rest of my panel here to say, what should Kay be looking for, whether through communications with the school?
One thing I was also going to say is, if you look at our school website, so like if you go to the UA Schools website, we have a lot under the teaching and learning tab. At the top, there's a banner that's gold and it says teaching and learning. And if you click on that, you can get to lots of information, whether it's individual schools where you could see some things that you may be interested in. But in addition, there are things like an assessment calendar and some of the programming things. And we're actually in the process of updating many of those pages because, as we said, we are learners too, and we want to continue to get better at getting better. And we want to tell you that story and make sure you're seeing and can see what's happening in the schools. So I would encourage you to go to that website as well. That may be a place for you to be able to find some of that information kind of at your fingertips.
So potentially, we're going to stay as long as you all have questions. Brett, do you have any other questions coming in on your end over there?
Yeah, we were just looking.
Okay.
What if a kid is saying, it's such a weird time right now, but one of the things that a parent can look out for is when a kid really doesn't want to go to school or is kind of avoiding that whole thing. And especially with the little kids, that's a clear sign that there's something going on. And I would say make sure that you reach out to your teacher at that point and start that conversation, because if you can get them reading and get them feeling good and positive and they're learning, kids love to go to school, especially when they're little. So that would be something I would look for.
Absolutely. At first there, I thought you might have been talking about the adults. Just kidding. Sorry. That's a COVID joke. Sorry.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right. And, one of the things that with school avoidance, a lot of times we immediately go to behaviors. Is there a unkind peer in the classroom? Did something happen at recess? But honestly, we want to go through those things, right? Because kids are having that lived experience. I remember my son, before his very first day of middle school, he was like terrified. He didn't want to go in. And we finally figured out it's because he didn't want to change in the locker room before cross country practice. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's why you don't want to go to school. But it could be a lot of things. But Brett is 100% right. If we rule out the social components to it, it could be academic, and it really could come down to it. And we saw that's why we opened with the video, and we started with that heart component. It could be that because I'm struggling with something in school, and we got to drill down. And that's exactly why we have this framework of MTSS to do a deep dive as a collaborative team to really find out. And the student is a part of that team as well. We want students advocating for themselves and learning to find their voice to speak up for themselves as well.
I would reiterate that. In fact, I work with people from different districts, different states, and a lot of times even, behavioral issues, maybe in places where a child is not identified or not really given proper reading instruction, or like how we used to be, 10 years ago. A lot of the behavior problems are academically related. And if you can't read, you either withdraw or you misbehave. And so whenever I hear about a kid misbehaving, I always say, check it out. See if there's something that we can do to help them with reading.
We talked, and Diana, I think has a question here. We talked about this yesterday with our principals. So all the principals are direct reports to me, and we run a weekly check-in with elementary principals on Tuesdays and secondary on Wednesdays. And one of the things I shared with them is that reminder, Brett, that you're talking about, that all behavior is communication. All behaviors are communication. So what is the child trying to tell us? And we want to drill down into that. So Diana, did you have something you wanted to, I think you might have unmuted there a moment ago.
I do have another quick question. So something that pops up a lot with UA Kid parent questions is, like, as we're making this shift into the science of reading, and there's that discussion about the reading wars, a lot of parents that have several children in the school system, but at different ages, have experienced working with just right books or leveled books. And I know we're transitioning to something a little bit different now. Can you speak a little bit about what that might look like? I get questions about, is my child going to bring home a book that is matched to their reading level, like a just right book? They also ask, like, what does a decodable book mean? Can you talk a little bit about what that means to the elementary parents, please?
Sure. And Andy Rosen, I'll let you jump in if you have any thoughts on this too. But that's it. What Diana's bringing up is exactly what professional learning has been around for our teachers. And as they are learning how to help parents understand that, this is something that we're going to continue to work through. So, for example, when Diana was talking about Just Right books or our guided reading books, there are little books that there's nothing inherently wrong with those little books. And Andy Rosen has done a great job of really helping our teachers understand and really teaching all of us that when you look at that book, there's not anything wrong with that. However, how you use it is what matters. So if I'm a first grade teacher and I've taught specific concepts in structured literacy, and I've been teaching those to the kids, and they're ready to handle this book that we're used to using and the kinds of books that we had before, then we'll say, yeah, they could take that home, and they're not going to know these 5 words. And maybe there's a sticky note on the top for the parents that says, just tell them these words. They don't need to figure these ones out because they haven't learned those yet. That's a new kind of learning for parents. When we learned to read, we did that patterning thing about the bear hunt, right? Or we could recite those things and we thought we were learning it, but we really weren't decoding those words. So when Diana's talking about decodable books, those are books that we do want your child to read all those words that are coming home in those little books. And that's because those were written specifically with that structured literacy approach. And they were written in a way that the words that children are going to come across are words that they've been taught, and they know the rules to apply to those words. So they didn't memorize those words, they've learned the rules. And that's the difference between what Diana's saying. And truthfully, across the nation, people are starting to make this transition. This is still new. Publishers are barely catching up. Brett, we've talked about this a lot. We've purchased and we continue. I just placed an order this week for more thousands of dollars of books that will be coming into classrooms that are decodable books for our teachers and for our kids. So more to come on that. I think that'll be continued learning for parents and teachers and the language around that. But that's just a quick answer, as I know it is 8:12, almost 8:15, and I know we said we'd try to finish up by 8. But I appreciate that, and that is definitely still part of the curriculum shift in conversations that we're having specifically around that K1, K2 age.
Well, and I appreciate you talking about that, because I was at the library the other day and they had a lot of the old books. And I think Andy Rosen and I are going in to talk to the juvenile library director about buying a bunch more decodable books. And I know the district has committed to buying many more, instead of modifying or kind of jerry-rigging some of these old books, it would be much better to have what actually dovetails with the instruction. So I know that's what we're shooting for.
It's great. It's going to take a team effort to start to make all those shifts.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, I
just wanted to say something before we close. I'm sorry, I was just waiting for a good time. My name's Victor, and Andy, I had heard you say something about at first we always go to the behavior or that social aspect. At what point do you filter out that, for lack of a better descriptor, with that white noise? At what point do you identify, okay, this isn't a behavioral issue, this is a learning disability? And I'm sorry, I wanted to say one more thing. Brett, I appreciate everything that you and your organization are doing, and with the school system and working with the school. You've been an indispensable resource to us and many other families. So I'm very appreciative of that.
Victor, thank you.
Dr. Hatton, do you mind if I jump in on this just from personal experience, and then maybe you can address that? So Brett, it actually really hits home for me when you talk about avoidance. Having had a child who started to show some of the avoidance behaviors and really stopped wanting to attend school, and I wish I knew then what I know now. One of the things that is difficult is, there weren't the same things in place in his experience early on. It's not a UA experience for him. But when I look at what we're doing with MTSS, and because we're talking about every child and we're talking about a range of things with every child, if those avoidance behaviors are showing up, or if those anxieties are showing up, that's going to come into that MTSS framework. And when I look at the range of data that our teams are looking at, I really wish for my child when he was younger that I would have had that range of data, that he would have, had access to, for other people to be looking at that and saying, okay, what is there here that is more? And I think for any of us who've experienced that with our own children, I think what really resonates in the video for me is to listen to the gentleman at the end say, we're not dumb, right? We're not dumb. So I am very thankful to see that we're taking this range of data, and in my own experience, wish I had seen the same thing earlier with my child. So this is critically important that we do that. And I think as we start to see those things, and as we're talking about every child, the systematic approach to this is really critical, and looking at a range of data to identify those things is really critical. And I think the other piece there, if we're going to partner on this, and I think Brett said it early on, is If you're seeing something that is not seen, then you need to communicate it right away. And then we need to partner on what might be the underlying cause. But I am very happy to see us talk about every kid and look at all of these factors for every kid on a systematic basis. Dr. Hatton, you can jump in, but that just resonated with me in terms of listening to what we've been talking about tonight.
Yeah, Victor, thank you for the question. And to answer your question, so the context of the situation that I was responding to was school avoidance in general. And I was in a school the other day, though, just to answer your question, because it's actually almost instantaneous to answer your question directly. I was in a school the other day and helping out. We were a little bit short-staffed, and we had a kindergartner that was having a tough time of it. And I spent time with this young learner, and very initially escalated, calmed down, finally started verbalizing. We started talking through, and I did start with some, was it a peer interaction? Was there something that happened? Within moments, though, he started talking to me. The child started talking to me, and the first thing that they were asked to do when they walked into the classroom every day is write their name. And the child said, "I can write capital A. I struggle to write lowercase a." And I said, "Oh, okay." So I used that as one simple example. And then, of course, I talked to the teacher. Then I connected the child to the teacher and said, make sure we call home. So really, they are parallel, almost in parallel. I think it's just human nature to kind of start with social interactions. But we are just naturally wired to also get very quickly to, there's something that connects to learning. I noticed you said disability, but I think that are matching the right instructional approach initially in terms of the spirit of MTSS. And then it may end up with that level of determination after screeners and diagnostics are put into place. But we got to, really, we quickly want to get to, are we matching the instructional needs for this child?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm holding my 9-month-old.
All good. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, and thank you. It is about 8:20, but I wanted to thank everybody from the district, all the parents. It's a good collaboration. We all grow together, and it's better for our kids. So we appreciate it. Thank you. And we will make a recording of this, and we will place it on the UA Kid website, and you all can put it on the district website if you would like. So thank you so much, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.